If you're a Christian woman over 50 who's drowning in caregiving duties while everyone calls you blessed for your sacrifice, this is your lifeline. Margaret Robertson discovered that the breaking point isn't where God abandons you, it's where He's been waiting all along. This isn't about being a better caregiver. This is about discovering soul flowing when your soul feels completely drained. You're about to learn why your 3:47 a.m. wake-ups aren't anxiety, they're divine appointments. And why the moment you think you'll collapse might be the exact moment heaven intervenes. The sheets are soaked with sweat Margaret doesn't remember producing. 3:47 a.m. glares from the nightstand clock like an accusation. The same time she's awakened every night since becoming Mom's full-time caregiver, 6 months ago. David's pillow still smells like his aftershave, 2 years after the heart attack. And Mom's bell rings from down the hall, the 4th time tonight. Margaret's chest tightens with something between rage and despair. A feeling no good Christian woman over 50 should admit exists. I'm becoming someone I hate, she whispers into the darkness. The house groans with 3 generations of sacrifice, her grandmother's china collecting dust, David's unopened mail, Mom's medical equipment colonizing every surface. Margaret pads to the bathroom, avoiding her reflection, but catches it anyway. Gray roots, showing David's old robe hanging loose. Eyes that look exactly like Mom's did before Dad died. When did I become the ghost in my own life? The thought arrives unbidden, sharp as shattered glass. She's been so focused on keeping Mom alive, she hasn't noticed she's dying inside. Mom's bell rings again, insistent, demanding, and Margaret feels something snap, not break, but release, like a rubber band pulled too tight, finally giving way. She doesn't move toward Mom's room. Instead, she sits on the closed toilet lid and does something she hasn't done in months. Nothing for exactly 3 minutes. She chooses herself over duty, and in that rebellious silence, she swears she hears something. Not God's voice exactly, but a whisper that sounds like David. Maggie, you're drowning in shallow water. The guilt arrives immediately. That familiar Christian woman's burden that makes choosing yourself feel like betraying God. But tonight, something's different. Tonight, the guilt feels like a lie. Margaret stands, ties David's robe tighter, and makes a decision that will change everything. She walks past Mom's room to David's old study instead. If God wants her attention at 3:47 a.m., He's going to have to say something more than sacrifice harder. But that's when she sees it. David's Bible open on his desk, turned to a page she's never noticed. With 2 words circled in red ink she doesn't recognize. Soul flowing. Margaret stares at David's handwriting. Those 2 mysterious words, soul flowing, circled like a secret message from beyond. The house settles around her. Mom's bell finally silent, and she realizes this is the first time in 6 months she's sat in David's chair. Her body remembers this leather, shaped to his form, and suddenly she's sobbing, not the pretty tears of church testimony, but the ugly cry of a woman who's been holding her breath for 2 years. MIT research shows that 73% of mature women of faith experience chronic insomnia during caregiving years, but nobody mentions that statistic during prayer circle. The tears blur her vision, but she sees more notes in David's margins. Dates going back 3 years before his heart attack, before Mom's stroke, back when life still felt possible. 3:47 a.m. again. One entry reads, God keeps waking me. Martha broke under caregiving. Mary chose better. But what if there's a third way? Soul flowing, not grinding, not abandoning, but flowing. Margaret's breath catches. David was struggling too, carrying his own mother through dementia while she was too busy with school committees to notice. He'd been drowning in his own shallow water. She pulls her phone out, desperate for answers, and types 3:47 a.m. spiritual significance into Google. The results flood in angel numbers, demon hours, conspiracy theories, but buried on page 3, she finds a forum for Christian women caregivers. Anyone else wake at 3:47? Posted 2 days ago. 47 responses. All women over 50. All exhausted caregivers. All searching for meaning in their exhaustion. One comment stops her cold. My husband left me a note about something called soul flowing before he died. Said it saved his sanity during his dad's cancer. Anyone heard of this? Margaret's hands shake as she types her first internet comment in 5 years. I just found the same phrase in my late husband's Bible. Christian woman, 57, caring for mother with stroke. Been waking at 3:47 for 6 months. Thought I was going crazy. Within minutes, 3 responses appear. Jennifer from Michigan, Ruth from Georgia, Patricia from Texas. All waking at 3:47. All desperate. All ready for something beyond mere survival. This isn't insomnia, it's a summoning. But that's when Mom's bell rings with new urgency, and Margaret hears a crash from her room. Margaret finds Mom on the floor, trying to crawl to the bathroom, dignity abandoned in the face of basic need. I'm sorry, honey, Mom whimpers, and Margaret sees the wet sheets, smells the humiliation, feels her own composure shatter. This is the 3rd time this week. As she lifts Mom heavier than memory, lighter than guilt, she hears her own voice, harsh and unrecognizable. I can't keep doing this. Mom starts crying, and Margaret immediately backpedals. No, Mom, I didn't mean, but she did mean it, every word. That's the terrible truth about overcoming burnout as a Christian. Admitting you're burned out feels like admitting you don't love enough. After settling Mom back in clean sheets, Margaret returns to David's study. But the moment feels broken. The mystery of soul flowing overshadowed by the reality of urine-soaked laundry waiting downstairs. She catches her reflection in David's desktop monitor, dark screen-turned mirror, and barely recognizes herself. When did her face become all sharp angles and shadows? When did her eyes go dead? The voice of wasted years, she name it later, whispers, it's familiar poison. You're failing at the one thing that matters, love. What kind of Christian woman resents her own mother? What kind of daughter counts the days until ... Double quotes, stop. She won't finish that thought, can't. But it's there, lurking like a cancer. The secret relief she'll feel when Mom finally ... No. Margaret grabs David's Bible, desperate for distraction, and reads his notes again. Martha was criticized for serving. Mary was praised for sitting. But Jesus didn't tell Martha to stop serving. He told her to stop being anxious and troubled. Soul flowing, serving from rest, not rest from serving. Her phone buzzes. Jennifer from the forum. I'm reading about burnout in Christian caregivers. We're not bad people. We're empty vessels trying to pour from dust. The washing machine calls from downstairs. Mom's sheets waiting. The endless cycle of care demanding attention. Margaret starts to stand, then stops. Sits back down. Opens David's journal, instead the one she's been afraid to read since the funeral. Page 1. If you're reading this, Maggie, I'm gone and you're drowning. The caregiving almost killed me before the heart attack did. But I found something. Pastor Williams won't understand. Sarah will think you've lost it. But at 3:47 a.m., when God refuses to let you sleep, He's not punishing you. He's recruiting you. But that's when she reads the next line, and everything changes. Soul flowing, saved my life. It came too late for my body, but not for my spirit. Don't wait like I did. Margaret's fingers trace David's words, night watches underlined 3 times in purple ink. She fumbles for her phone, Googles it while Mom's breathing monitor hums through the baby monitor. When did her mother become the child? The screen illuminates truth she's never heard in 30 years of Sunday service. Biblical night watches, the ancient Hebrew division of darkness into sacred segments. The 4th watch, 3 a.m. to 6 a.m., when Jesus walked on water, when God spoke to Samuel, when angels wrestled Jacob. The time when heaven's frequency is clearest, David wrote. When exhausted souls receive strength for impossible tasks. Her phone buzzes with forum notifications. Ruth from Georgia has posted, ladies, I'm a seminary dropout, 73 years old, caring for a husband with Alzheimer's. What your husband's discovered about soul flowing connects to the ancient practice of night watches. God doesn't wake us at 3:47 to torment us. He wakes us because that's when the veil is thinnest, when caregivers' hearts are most honest, when biblical rest for women means something different than sleep. Margaret reads it twice, 3 times, feeling something shift in her chest, not healing it, but the promise of it. She opens 2 Psalms, where David the king, not her David, wrote, on my bed, I remember you. I meditate on you in the night watches. How many nights had her David sat here, reading these same words while she slept, oblivious to his spiritual battle? His margin note: meditation isn't emptying the mind, it's filling it with truth while the world sleeps. Soul flowing happens when we stop fighting the wake-up and start accepting the invitation. Another note, dated just a week before his heart attack. Thought Maggie would think I'm crazy if I told her about the 347 Club. Protect her from this burden. But maybe it's not a burden. The forum explodes with responses. Jennifer shares how she discovered her grandmother's prayer journal, filled with 3 a.m. entries. Patricia mentions finding her mother's Bible, marked at every night watch passage. These women, scattered across America, all stumbling onto the same secret. Christian women over 50 have been meeting God in the fourth watch for generations, but nobody talks about it in daylight. It's the underground railroad of spiritual exhaustion, the secret society of sanctified insomnia. But that's when Sarah texts, "Mom, are you awake? I'm worried about you." The cameras show you up at all hours. This isn't healthy. Margaret stares at Sarah's text. The security cameras her daughter installed for Mom's safety now, surveillance on her own unraveling. But tonight, instead of shame, she feels defiance. "I'm discovering something your father knew." She types back, something called soul flowing. Send. The 3 dots of Sarah's typing appear, disappear, appear again. Finally, "Mom, you're scaring me." First Dad with his religious obsession before he died. Now you. Maybe you should talk to someone professional. Professional. As if grief and exhaustion are problems to be solved, not passages to be walked. Margaret turns back to David's journal, finds an entry that stops her cold. Sarah will resist soul flowing because she's never been broken enough to need it. Pray she never is. But Maggie, when the time comes, she'll understand that insomnia isn't the problem. It's the solution to a problem she doesn't know she has yet. Her phone buzzes. Ruth again. Here's the controversial truth. Your pastor won't tell you God uses exhaustion more than energy. Moses was 80 and exhausted when he led the Exodus. Jesus was depleted in Gethsemane when he saved the world. The baby monitor crackles with Mom's sleep talking. "Harold, is that you?" Harold was Dad, gone 15 years. Even unconscious, Mom lives in the past while Margaret drowns in the present. But David's next journal entry reframes everything. The 347 wake-up isn't stealing your rest, it's revealing where your real rest comes from. Not sleep, not absence of responsibility, but flowing with God's rhythm instead of fighting against it. Soul flowing, the art of serving from overflow, not emptiness. Margaret creates her first forum post that goes deeper. What if we've been wrong about rest? What if biblical rest doesn't mean stopping, but moving with divine current instead of against it? My husband wrote about soul flowing, serving from rest, not resting from serving. Anyone else tired of being told to practice self-care when what we really need is soul care? The responses pour in immediately. These women get it, the difference between bubble baths and biblical transformation, between taking breaks and breaking through. But that's when she finds David's final entry, dated the morning of his heart attack. "If I die today, Maggie needs to know. Soul flowing isn't just a concept, it's a practice. And it starts with creating a sacred space for the 347 appointment." Margaret surveys David's study with new eyes, seeing not a shrine to grief but a sanctuary waiting for purpose. His desk faces east, of course it does. David never did anything without intention. She clears the medical bills, the sympathy cards now yellowed with age, the dealing with loss pamphlets Sarah keeps sending. In their place, she arranges what David's journal calls the soul-flowing essentials. Mom's baby monitor reality can't be ignored. David's Bible, a candle that smells like cedar, his cologne. Her grandmother's prayer shawl she hasn't touched in years, and a new journal leather-bound, empty, waiting. The Forum sisters are creating their own spaces. Jennifer posts a photo, kitchen table cleared of everything but Bible and coffee, facing her garden where she can see both sunrise and her husband's window in the memory care unit. Ruth shares her setup, a closet converted to prayer room because it's the only space my husband's confusion can't penetrate. Patricia bought a camping chair for her backyard, says she meets God under stars while her mother sleeps. These aren't Instagram-worthy prayer corners, they're foxholes for spiritual warfare. Functional rather than beautiful. Honest rather than aesthetic. Margaret tests the chair's position, adjusts the lamp David bought for his old eyes, places her reading glasses where she won't have to search at 3:47. She's preparing for morning routine with God like a soldier preparing for battle. Because maybe that's what this is. The monitor shows Mom sleeping peacefully, face relaxed in dreams Margaret can't access. How strange that Mom looks more like herself asleep. The stroke's cruel redesign temporarily lifted. David wrote, "The space matters less than the intention." But intention without space remains theory. Soul flowing requires a physical altar for spiritual battle. She finds his worship playlist on last played the night before he died. 4 a.m. flowing. Kate Green, Reach Mullins, Fernando Ortega, the deep cuts. Not Sunday morning performances. Music for people who've seen too much to pretend everything's fine. Margaret saves it to her phone. Adds her own discoveries. Audrey Assad's death. Be Not Proud. Andrew Peterson's The Dark Before the Dawn. This is the soundtrack for soul flowing. For women who wake in darkness searching for light. For exhausted caregivers becoming prayer warriors. But that's when she notices something hidden behind David's desk lamp, a photo she's never seen. Herself, asleep in this very chair, dated 3 years ago with David's handwriting. Maggie's first soul flow moment. She doesn't know she's doing it yet. The photo trembles in Margaret's hands herself, unconscious, yet somehow purposeful. Hands folded in prayer, even in exhausted sleep. David saw something she didn't know existed. Documented a spiritual practice she was doing without doctrine. Now, at 2:30 a.m., she's intentionally preparing for the 3:47 summons, and her body vibrates with anticipation mixed with terror. Ruth has posted about breath prayers. Not Christian self-care nonsense, but ancient practice. The Jesus prayer. The Desert Fathers. Breathing scripture until scripture breathes you. Margaret practices in David's chair, his journal open to instructions she's never seen. Inhale, when I am afraid. Exhale, I trust in you. Repeat until the words become blood, become bone, become being. Her lungs. Tight with months of shallow panic breathing. Resist at first. The exhale sounds like defeat. But by the 4th repetition, something loosens. By the 10th, tears flow without sobs. By the 20th, she understands this isn't meditation. It's medication for a soul that's forgotten how to breathe. God. Mom stirs on the monitor, mumbling Dad's name again. Lost in the past, that's more real than present. Margaret adjusts the volume loud enough to hear crisis, quiet enough to miss complaints. This is what Christian self-care actually looks like. Boundaries that honor both love and limits. She breathes David's favorite verse. In peace I will lie down and sleep. For you alone, Lord, make me dwell in safety. Inhale peace. Exhale control. Inhale trust. Exhale the myth that she holds anyone's life in her hands. 3:45 a.m. 2 minutes until the appointment she didn't make but can't miss. The Forum sisters are awake, too. She sees them online, little green dots of shared vigil. Jennifer posts, breathing be still and know. Each exhale releasing one more thing I cannot control. Ruth shares, 40 years of ministry. And I'm just learning that breath prayer isn't about the words. It's about the space between them, where God lives. Patricia simply types, ready. They're all ready for the 3:47 download. The divine data dump that comes when exhausted women stop performing and start receiving. But that's when Margaret feels it, the shift, the thinning. The moment when 3:47 arrives, not with anxiety, but with anticipation. And she breathes the words that will become her soul-flowing signature. Here I am, Lord, here I am. Margaret's pen hovers over the blank page as 3:47 blazes from David's desk clock. Here I am, Lord, she writes, then stops. What comes after availability? The monitor shows Mom peaceful. The house holds its breath. And Margaret writes the truth she's never spoken. I'm 57 and feel 97. I'm caring for a mother who doesn't remember my name and grieving a husband who knew secrets about soul flowing he never shared. Is there purpose after exhaustion? Is there calling beyond caregiving? The pen moves without her permission, downloading thoughts she didn't know existed. David saw me doing soul flowing before I knew its name. She writes, how many other women are flowing without knowing? How many are drowning thinking they're failing? The words pour out like water breaking through a damn 3 pages of honesty that would horrify her prayer group. About resenting mom's needs. About missing sexual intimacy with David. About wondering if finding purpose after 50 means anything when you're too tired to pursue it. This isn't the gratitude journal Christianity prescribes. This is the guttural journal Christianity requires but rarely admits. Jennifer messages the forum. I'm writing things I can't say out loud. About wanting my husband to die so we can both be free. About hating God for letting Alzheimer's steal him cell by cell. Is this okay? Ruth responds immediately. Honey, God can handle your honesty better than your hiding. David wrote in Psalms about his enemies. We just call ours circumstances and chronic illness. Write it all. Soul flowing requires emptying before filling. Margaret finds herself nodding in the dark, adding to her journal. The night whispers, what day denies, I'm disappearing. And nobody notices because caregiving makes you invisible in plain sight. She turns to David's journal, finds a section titled Night Whispers Decoded. 3:47 a.m. God speaks to Jacob about wrestling. 3:48 Promise of new name. 3:49 The limp that proves the blessing. Maggie will discover her limp is her qualification, not disqualification. Her exhaustion is her credential for this ministry. Ministry. Margaret almost laughs. She can barely minister to mom's basic needs. But something in David's certainty makes her right. What if soul flowing isn't about doing more, but about being more? What if purpose after 50 isn't about productivity, but about presence? But that's when mom's bell rings with unusual panic, and the monitor shows her sitting up, eyes wide with terror. Margaret recognizes mom's having one of her episodes where past trauma visits present darkness. Margaret rushes to mom's room, finds her reaching for someone invisible, speaking to Dad who's been gone 15 years. Harold, don't leave me with the bills. I can't do this alone. Mom's eyes see 1975, not 2025, trapped in the loop of Dad's first heart attack when Margaret was 7. Instead of correcting mom's confusion, like the doctors taught, Margaret tries something different. She enters the memory. Mom, Harold says he's got the bills covered. He wants you to rest now. Mom's face transforms, decades of worry dissolving. He does. She whispers, yes, Mom. Everything's handled. Mom settles back, instantly peaceful. And Margaret realizes, she just did instinctively what David wrote about, soul flowing, entering someone's reality to offer God's peace, not forcing them into yours. She stays until mom's breathing deepens, then returns to find her journal moved. Not drastically, just shifted, and David's Bible opened to a different page. Ecclesiastes. For everything there is a season. With a new note in David's handwriting, fresh ink, impossible ink. Now is your season, Maggie. The rational mind screams hallucination, exhaustion, grief playing tricks. But Margaret's soul knows. This is the breakthrough the forum sisters described. When the veil doesn't just thin, but tears. Jennifer's posting in real time, something's happening. My husband just spoke my name correctly for the first time in 2 years. At exactly 3:47, Ruth adds, the heaviness lifted. Can't explain it. But the heaviness I've carried for 5 years just, lifted. Patricia, my mother slept through the night. First time since hospice started. What is happening? Margaret writes without thinking. Spiritual growth after 50 isn't about learning new things. It's about understanding what you've always known but never believed. We're not caregivers who happen to pray. We're prayer warriors disguised as caregivers. Every diaper changed, every medication administered, every sleepless night, it's all intercession. We're not just keeping them alive. We're standing in the gap between heaven and earth. Her hand cramps from writing so fast, downloading truth like Moses taking dictation on the mountain. But that's when the miraculous becomes practical. Mom's doctor calls at 7 a.m. Says her brain scans show inexplicable improvement in the stroke damage. I don't understand it, he admits. But something's changing. Margaret understands. Soul flowing changes everything. Sarah arrives unannounced at 8 a.m., finding Margaret still in David's study, journal full, eyes bright with something her daughter immediately distrusts. Mom, you look manic. When's the last time you slept? Really slept? Margaret wants to explain about soul flowing, about the breakthrough, about Mom's improvement, but sees Sarah's fear, the same expression she wore when David started his religious phase before dying. Honey, I'm not manic. I'm finally waking up. Sarah's face hardens. That's exactly what Dad said. Right before his heart exploded from stress. The words land like ice water, shocking Margaret into remembering. David did become obsessed those final months, staying up all night, forgetting medications, pushing his body past breaking. Sarah, but her daughter's already pulling out pamphlets. Menopause and mood disorders. Caregiver psychosis. Mom, what you're experiencing has medical explanations. This soul-flowing thing, Dad invented it, might have been his brain misfiring from cardiovascular disease. The clinical words feel like violence against something sacred. But Margaret forces herself to consider, what if Sarah's right? What if menopause and faith are creating a dangerous cocktail of delusion? She texts the forum, shares Sarah's concerns. Ruth responds with unexpected balance. Ladies, our children aren't wrong to worry. Hormones are real. Exhaustion causes hallucinations. But here's what they don't understand. God uses our biology for his purposes. Menopause removes the estrogen veil that kept us nice and quiet. We're not going crazy. We're going clear. But yes, take your medications. See your doctors. Soul flowing doesn't replace medical care, it transcends it. Jennifer adds, my therapist says my spiritual experiences are trauma responses. Maybe they are. But trauma response or Holy Spirit, the peace is real. Margaret looks at Sarah, really sees her, the fear of losing another parent, the desperate need for control in chaos. I'll make you a deal, Margaret says. I'll see your recommended therapist if you'll read Dad's journal. Just 5 pages. Then decide if he was manic or if he was onto something. Sarah hesitates, then nods. As she reads David's careful documentation of soul flowing, her expression shifts from skepticism to confusion to something like recognition. He wasn't crazy, she whispers. He was, systematic, scientific almost. Like he was researching something real. But that's when Mom's bell rings, and they find her actually standing by her window, pointing at the sunrise. Look, Margaret, the light is different today, younger somehow. 3 nights later, 3:47 arrives, but Margaret's body screams for sleep, not the holy exhaustion of soul flowing but the bone-deep depletion of someone who changed Mom's sheets twice today and fought with insurance companies for 5 hours. She sits up anyway, habit now. But David's journal falls open to a page she hasn't seen. Soul flowing includes rest. Not every 3:47 is a summons. Sometimes it's a reminder that you're human, not Hebrew prophet. Sleep is also sacred. Discernment matters. The forum is discussing this too. Patricia shares how she ignored her body's legitimate needs and ended up in the ER with exhaustion. I thought every wake-up was God calling. Turns out, sometimes it's just your bladder or blood sugar. Soul flowing means flowing with wisdom, not forcing spiritual meaning onto biological needs. Ruth adds her seminary knowledge. Even Jesus slept through the storm until needed. Biblical rest for women doesn't mean constant availability, it means knowing when you're the solution and when you're the problem. Margaret feels the relief of permission to close her eyes, to choose sleep, to trust that soul flowing isn't about perfect attendance at 3:47 a.m., but about perfect attention to what each moment requires. She texts the group, going back to sleep tonight. Not quitting, just flowing with what my body needs. The responses are immediate support, not judgment. Jennifer, rest well, warrior. Ruth, sometimes the most spiritual thing you can do is absolutely nothing. Patricia, your breakthrough made space for rest. Take it. She returns to bed, to her side that still feels wrong without David's warmth. But tonight, it doesn't feel like defeat. Mom's monitor shows peaceful sleep. The house settles into quiet. Margaret's eyes close with a new understanding. Soul flowing includes knowing when to paddle and when to drift, when to rise and when to rest. This isn't failure, it's mastery. The 347 Club isn't about religious performance, but about responsive presence. But that's when she dreams, vivid, purposeful, prophetic. David's there, younger, showing her something she can't quite see but knows is important. Something about Mom's past that will change everything about their present. Margaret wakes at 3:47 with dream fragments clinging like spiderwebs. David, showing her Mom's old diary, pointing to dates. Urgent but gentle. She goes to Mom's closet, finds the box she's been forbidden to touch since childhood, pulls out a journal from 1968. Mom's handwriting, young and hopeful. Harold works such long hours. Baby Margaret wakes at 3:47 every night, crying. Doctor says nothing wrong, but I know she's feeling my loneliness, absorbing my tears. God, if you're listening, help me be stronger for her. The revelation shifts everything. Margaret's been waking at 3:47 her entire life, inheriting Mom's prayer schedule before she could walk. This isn't new, it's cellular, generational, a covenant written in DNA and dormant until needed. She opens her journal, writes with ceremony. The 347 Covenant. I acknowledge this wake-up as sacred inheritance. I accept that some nights are for rising, others for resting. I commit to asking why am I awake, before assuming. I promise to see exhaustion as invitation, not punishment. This is my soul-flowing covenant, not perfection, but presence. The Forum sisters are making their own covenants. Jennifer writes hers in her grandmother's Bible. Patricia frames hers above her prayer chair. Ruth creates a video testimony for her granddaughters. This is our family's real inheritance, not money or property, but the knowledge that God meets exhausted women in their darkest hours. They're creating legacy from insomnia, purpose from pain, faith-based productivity that produces transformation, not just task completion. Sarah finds her that morning, reading both journals, Mom's and David's, side by side. Mom, what are you discovering? There's no sarcasm now, just curiosity. Margaret shows her the parallel entries. 3 generations of 347 wake-ups. Your dad knew our family carried this blessing. He spent his last months documenting it, preparing for when I'd need it. Sarah's eyes well, so when I wake at 3:47, Margaret nods. You'll know it's not anxiety, it's ancestry. The soul-flowing covenant passes through bloodlines, activated by exhaustion. But that's when Dr. Morrison calls with Mom's test results. I need to see you both immediately. The improvement we saw last week. There's something else. Something I've never seen in 40 years of neurology. Dr. Morrison's office walls display degrees and awards, but his face shows confusion. Your mother's brain is regenerating neural pathways that stroke destroyed. It's not possible, but it's happening. He shows the scans before and after, darkness retreating like tide. What are you doing differently? Margaret thinks of soul flowing, of 347 prayers, of entering Mom's memories instead of correcting them, just loving her better. She says simply. The doctor nods slowly. Whatever that means, keep doing it. Back home, Margaret shares the news with the Forum, and the testimonies pour in. Jennifer's husband, deep in Alzheimer's, had a lucid morning, recognized their children, said I love you clearly. Patricia's mother, given weeks to live, is gaining strength. Ruth's husband remembered their anniversary for the first time in 3 years. These aren't miracles in the showy sense, they're the quiet resurrections that happen when Christian women over 50 stop trying to control outcomes and start flowing with divine current. Ruth organizes a video called The First Time the 5 a.m. Sisters See Each Other's Faces. Jennifer looks exactly like her typed words, gentle but steely. Patricia's younger than expected but aged by grief. Ruth's eyes carry the wisdom of someone who's seen too much to doubt God's presence in darkness. They share stories that would sound insane at church. Husbands' ghosts delivering messages, medical mysteries that correlate with prayer times, children suddenly understanding what they previously mocked. We're not special, Ruth insists. We're just available at the hour when heaven's frequency is clearest. Margaret tells them about the generational discovery, Mom's journal, the inherited wake-up call. Patricia gasps, I found something similar. My grandmother's prayer journal, she called it the Watchers, women who stayed awake while families slept, praying protection. Jennifer adds, my mother-in-law mentioned something before she died. The 4 a.m. club. Said it saved her marriage, but never explained how. They're uncovering a hidden history of exhausted women meeting God in darkness, soul flowing before it had a name. But that's when Sarah walks in with her laptop. Mom, I've been researching soul flowing. There's nothing online. Dad invented it, right? Margaret looks at the other sisters on screen, sees the same recognition. Soul flowing isn't new, it's just never been documented by daylight people. Sarah's laptop screen floods with search results for 3 a.m., spiritual significance, demon hours, witching time, portals opening, fear-mongering, clickbait designed to terrorize the vulnerable. Mom, this is what comes up. How do you know soul flowing isn't just dangerous delusion? Margaret watches Sarah's genuine concern, remembers her own first Google search, the confusion of truth mixed with terror. Honey, fear sells better than peace, but perfect love casts out fear. Remember, the forum sisters have been discussing this too. Patricia posts, ladies, beware the 3 a.m. YouTube rabbit hole. I watched one video about spiritual warfare and couldn't sleep for days, not from God calling but from fear poisoning. Ruth adds her seminary wisdom. The enemy's greatest trick isn't making us doubt God, it's making us fear him. Yes, spiritual warfare is real, but we're warriors, not victims. Soul flowing is offensive, not defensive. We're taking territory, not just holding ground. Margaret creates her first teaching post for the group. Fear-based content assumes we're powerless at our most vulnerable hour. Soul flowing knows we're most powerful when we're most dependent. The difference: fear says something bad will happen at 3 a.m. Faith says God has been waiting for me at 3:47 since before time began. We're not avoiding the witching hour, we're reclaiming it as the watching hour. Let the fearmongers have their clicks. We'll take the kingdom. Jennifer shares how she installed apps to block fear-based content. I protect my mind like I protect my home. Not everything claiming to be spiritual is from the spirit. The sisters create a resource list of trusted teachers, legitimate spiritual warfare prayers, and most importantly, scripture that anchors truth. They're becoming mature women of faith who can eat meat, not just milk, who can discern between holy exhaustion and harmful exploitation. But that's when Mom calls from her room, voice clear and strong. Margaret, I remember something about when you were born, about why you've always woken at 3:47. I need to tell you before I forget again. Mom sits up in bed with clarity Margaret hasn't seen in months, eyes bright with urgent memory. You were born at 3:47 a.m. The cord was wrapped around your neck. You weren't breathing. The nurse said you were gone. But I prayed no. I commanded. I said this child will live and declare the works of the Lord. You gasped at 3:48. The doctor called it miraculous. Mom's eyes cloud again, the window of lucidity closing. I wake at 3:47 to thank God you lived. Maybe that's why we both wake. Gratitude or guardianship. Margaret helps Mom settle back to sleep, then walks through the house with new understanding. Every room holds prayers, decades of intercession soaked into walls. She begins speaking scripture over each space, not the generic bless this home but targeted truth. Over Mom's room, he gives his beloved sleep. Over the kitchen where exhaustion lives, man does not live by bread alone. Over David's study, your word is a lamp unto my feet. This isn't superstition, it's declaration. Soul flowing means recognizing your home as sanctuary, not just shelter. The Forum sisters share their own house prayers. Ruth walks her property line at 3:47, claiming ground. Patricia anoints door frames with oil, remembering Passover protection. Jennifer plays scripture music 24/7 at volume only spirit can hear. They're not performing rituals, but establishing atmosphere, creating spaces where spiritual rest can exist alongside physical chaos. We're atmospheric architects, Ruth writes. setting the spiritual temperature of our homes. Margaret finds David's prayer map of their house, a floor plan with scripture assigned to each room. Prayers for specific spaces, dated entries about spiritual atmosphere. His note: the house feels what we feel. Anxiety breeds in corners. Peace must be planted deliberately. Soul flowing includes environmental engineering. She adds her own prayers to his map, building on foundation he laid, and the house seems to exhale, settling into peace it hasn't known since he died. But that's when she notices something else on David's map: a room marked Future Prayer Chapel, with an arrow pointing to the garage, and a date. Margaret will understand by January 2025. 4 nights pass without words, without breakthrough, without even the comfort of exhausted peace. Margaret sits in David's chair at 3:47, but heaven feels closed, God distant, soul flowing like a beautiful dream she can't recapture. The forum is quiet to everyone, simultaneously hitting what Ruth calls the divine silent treatment. Mom's improvement has plateaued. Sarah stopped asking about soul flowing. The house feels heavier than before, like the spiritual atmosphere is holding its breath. David, did you have silent nights too? She asks his journal, finding a section she's overlooked. The silence. It comes after breakthrough. Before breakthrough. Sometimes instead of breakthrough, Maggie will think she's failed when silence arrives. But silence isn't absence, it's presence, so complete it needs no words. The darkness before dawn isn't empty, it's pregnant. Soul flowing through silence is graduate level faith. Easy for dead David to say. Living Margaret just feels abandoned. Jennifer breaks the forum silence. Does anyone else feel like God ghosted us? The admissions pour in. Patricia. I sit in my prayer chair and feel nothing, just fatigue. Ruth. 40 years of ministry, and these silent nights still shake me. But then Ruth adds, ladies, this is the test. Do we only soul flow when we feel it? Or do we show up at 3:47 regardless? This is where spiritual muscle builds in. The absence that requires presence anyway. Margaret writes without feeling, prays without passion, sits without sensation, but she sits, shows up, maintains the 3:47 appointment even when the other party seems absent. This is the empty nest purpose, not just when children leave, but when God seems to. You keep preparing the space, setting the table, maintaining the rhythm even when you're the only one who shows up. Because soul flowing isn't about the flow you feel, it's about the flow you faith. But that's when Mom has another fall, this time breaking her hip, and the ambulance lights at 3:47 a.m. feel like mockery. Where's the divine protection in this? The hospital room monitors beep in medical rhythm while Mom sleeps off surgery, and Margaret realizes she's been awake since yesterday's 3:47. Sarah arrives with coffee and exhaustion. Mom, you need to go home. Sleep. But Margaret knows home means empty house, empty chair, empty prayers. I'll stay, she says, and Sarah doesn't argue. They sit in silence that isn't silent, machines breathing, nurses padding, the hospital's 24-hour circulation that never rests. At 3:47 a.m. in the hospital chair, Margaret feels the summons differently. Not to rise, but to remain. To soul flow in a plastic chair under fluorescent lights. She opens David's journal, finds a section titled From 3:47 to 5 a.m. The wake-up is just the invitation. The real work happens in the transition to dawn. 3:47 breaks us open. 4 a.m. empties us out. 4:30 fills us up. By 5 a.m., we're ready to flow into day. This is the full cycle. Maggie will discover not just waking, but transitioning. Not just breaking, but building. Mom stirs eyes, foggy with medication, but somehow present. Margaret, sing the morning song. Margaret doesn't know what she means until she does the lullaby Mom sang when Margaret was sick, which was actually a hymn. Morning has broken, like the first morning. She sings soft, uncertain, but Mom's face relaxes into peace that transcends pain medication. The night nurse stops, listens, eyes wet. My grandmother sang that, she whispers. At dawn. Said it called the sun up. By 4:30, other patients' families drift to Mom's room. Drawn by something Margaret's singing, The peace, the inexplicable sense that this room holds something different. She shares about soul flowing, about the 3:47 wake-up, about transitioning from night watch to morning glory. A young mother with a sick child nods. I've been waking at 3:47 since he was diagnosed. An elderly man adds, my wife did too, before she passed, said God was preparing her for the ultimate dawn. They're discovering that 5 a.m. prayer routine isn't just personal, it's communal, generational, eternal. But that's when the doctor arrives with mom's prognosis. The surgery went well, but at her age, with her conditions, you need to prepare for the possibility she won't walk again, won't come home. Sarah creates a spreadsheet because that's how she processes crisis columns for medications, rows for treatments, color-coded for urgency. Mom, we need systems if Grandma's going to need full-time care. Margaret watches her daughter organize chaos into cells and realizes this too is soul-flowing, creating practical structures for spiritual practice. You're right, Margaret says, surprising them both. Let's create a ritual checklist. But not just for Grandma's care, for our care too. Together, they develop what Sarah calls the Soul Flow System, a practical guide for Christian self-care that's actually sustainable. 9 p.m. Prepare tomorrow's medications and clothes, Martha work. 10 p.m. Final check on mom, adjust monitors, shepherding work. 11 p.m. Personal preparation, shower, comfortable clothes, David's robe, self-honoring work. 2 a.m. If awakened, assess bathroom, water, or summons, discernment work. 3:47 a.m. If called, respond. If not, rest, obedience work. The checklist feels like scaffolding for a spiritual practice that could otherwise collapse under exhaustion. The Forum sisters love it, adapt it to their situations. Jennifer adds to 30 a.m. Protein snack by bedside, blood sugar crashes masquerade as spiritual crisis. Patricia includes 4:30 a.m. Journal even if nothing comes, showing up as the miracle. Ruth contributes 5 a.m. Thank God for surviving another night. Gratitude before requests. They're creating a manual for exhausted caregivers. A practical guide to mystical practice. Christianity that includes checking blood pressure alongside Bible verses. Margaret posts the complete checklist, and it goes viral within their small community. Women screenshot it, print it, tape it to bathroom mirrors. They're treating soul flowing like training for a marathon, which maybe it is. A marathon where the finish line keeps moving. The course changes nightly, and the only medal is making it to dawn with faith intact. This isn't the Christian self-care of bubble baths and boundaries, it's the self-care of soldiers preparing for battle they didn't choose but can't abandon. But that's when Margaret's own body betrays her. Chest pains at 3:47. Familiar tightness. David's final symptom arriving like an inheritance she doesn't want. The chest pain subsides but leaves Margaret shaking. Sarah insisting on the ER. But Margaret knows this isn't heart attack, it's heartbreak. The physical manifestation of carrying too much for too long. Just let me do one thing, she tells Sarah, opening her laptop to the forum. I need to guide them through a soul flow session. In case ... double quotes, she doesn't finish. In case she follows David sooner than expected. Sarah nods, sets up the camera, becomes her mother's technical support in this possibly final teaching. Sisters, Margaret begins, voice steady despite everything. We're going to soul flow together. Right now, wherever you are. First, honor your body, feet flat, spine supported, hands open. This exhausted body has carried you through impossible days. Thank it. She watches comments appear, women in hospital rooms, kitchen tables, bedroom floors, joining across miles and circumstances. Now breathe with me. Inhale, I am exhausted. Exhale, and that's okay. We're not overcoming burnout as Christians by denying it, we're overcoming by accepting it as qualification, not disqualification. She guides them through David's progression. 3:47 Acknowledge the summons without judgment. 3:50 Ask, what do you need me to know? 4 o'clock Empty yourself of yesterday's failures. 4:15 Receive today's strength, even if it's just enough for the next hour. 4:30 Begin transitioning from survival to revival. 4:45 Speak, blessing over the impossible day ahead. 5 o'clock rise or rest, but either way, you've soul flowed. Women type their breakthroughs in real time. Jennifer, I felt warmth for the first time in months. Patricia, my husband just smiled in his sleep. Sarah watches her mother transform from exhausted caregiver to spiritual director. Sees what David must have seen Margaret becoming who she was always meant to be. Not despite the exhaustion, but because of it. The chest pain doesn't return. The forum explodes with testimonies. And Margaret realizes this is what David meant by ministry. Not platform or program, but presence. Showing up at 3:47 to guide others through their dark until dawn arrives. But that's when Ruth private messages, Margaret, I need to tell you something about David, about why he really started documenting soul flowing. It wasn't just for you, it was for all of us. He knew something was coming. Ruth's message continues. David contacted me 6 months before he died, said God showed him a vision. Thousands of exhausted Christian women, waking at 3:47, thinking they're alone, dying in isolation. He said soul flowing would become a movement, but only after you discovered it through necessity, not theory. Margaret, he prepared everything for this moment. Check the garage. Margaret's hands shake as she leaves Mom's hospital room. Drives home through 4 a.m. darkness. Opens the garage door to find transformation. David turned it into a prayer chapel. Soft lighting, windows he installed, facing east, her grandmother's rocking chair, his mother's Bible, photos of women through generations, all the 347 warriors in their family line. And at the center, a leather journal with her name in gold, for Maggie, when you're ready to lead them home. Inside, detailed plans for the soul-flowing movement, complete with teachings, progression levels, even architectural plans for converting spaces into prayer chapels. He knew. He spent his last months preparing for her to discover what he'd found. She sits in the grandmother's chair, opens David's final entry. Tonight I pray for every woman who will read these words. You who wake at 3:47 with terror in your chest and exhaustion in your bones. You who carry parents, spouses, children through valleys while your own souls starve. This is your prayer, from my lips to God's ears, from David's heart to yours. Margaret reads aloud, streaming live to the forum without planning, and the prayer pours out like living water. Lord, you see her at 3:47. Mascara streaked, hope depleted, wondering if you've forgotten her address. You know the exact weight of her burden, counted every tear stored in your bottle. Tonight, we declare, her exhaustion is not emptiness but readiness. Her breaking is not ending but beginning. Her 3:47 wake-up is not punishment but promotion. She's not failing, she's soul-flowing, even when it feels like drowning. Give her biblical rest that doesn't require stopping. Give her strength that doesn't demand striving. Show her that this impossible season is actually her coronation as prayer warrior, as night watcher, as the one who stands between heaven and earth when everyone else sleeps. The comments explode, women weeping, breakthrough happening, marriages being restored, diagnoses changing, but most importantly, exhausted women finding permission to be exhausted while still being mighty. This is biblical rest for women, not the absence of burden, but the presence of divine partnership in carrying it. But that's when Sarah calls, Mom, come quickly. Grandma's awake and asking for you. She says she has something urgent to tell you about Dad, about soul flowing, about why he really died. Mom's eyes are clearer than they've been since the stroke. Her voice stronger than since David's funeral. Margaret, I need to confess something. David didn't just have a heart attack. He gave his life for this. The night before he died, he prayed to trade his remaining years for the soul-flowing movement to begin. He said, Lord, take my life as seed. Let my death water what Maggie will grow. I begged him not to pray that prayer. But he said, finding purpose after 50 sometimes means choosing what your death will birth. The revelation breaks. Margaret not into pieces, but into purpose. David didn't just die. He sowed himself into soil for something bigger. Sarah grabs her mother's hand. Then we honor him by building it. The soul-flowing movement. The 5 a.m. sisters. Everything he envisioned. Margaret nods through tears, then turns to her phone. To the 1,000 women now watching live, sisters, David gave his life for us to find ours. Will you commit to 7 nights of soul flowing? 7 nights of meeting God at 3:47, transitioning to 5 a.m. Discovering what you're really carrying isn't burden, but blessing. The commitments flood in. Jennifer, 7 nights. I'm in for 7 years. Patricia, my daughter, just texted. She's been waking at 3:47 since her divorce. I'm bringing her in. Ruth, I'm starting a soul-flowing chapter at my church. Pastor doesn't understand yet, but the women do. They're not just making personal commitments, they're becoming apostles of exhaustion. Evangelists of the fourth watch, missionaries to the sleepless. Margaret creates the hashtag 7 nights of soul flowing. Within hours, it's trending among Christian women over 50. Sarah sets up the infrastructure website, private forums, local chapter guidelines, her business brain finally understanding this isn't religious mania but revolutionary movement. Mom, Dad was a genius. He knew you couldn't receive this as teaching, you had to discover it through suffering. He knew I couldn't accept it as theory, I had to see it as transformation. He orchestrated all of this. Mom nods from her hospital bed. David always said his death would mean more than his life. Now I understand. But that's when the miraculous becomes medical. Mom stands up. Without walker, without help, legs that shouldn't work carrying her to Margaret. It's time to go home. Our work isn't done. 6 months later, Margaret stands in the converted garage now. The soul-flowing chapel with 23 women gathered for the first in-person meeting of the 5 a.m. sisters. Jennifer drove from Michigan. Patricia flew from Texas. Ruth leads worship with songs no contemporary service would recognize, hymns for the haggard, psalms for the sleepless. Mom sits in the front row, walking testimony to impossible recovery. Sarah coordinates logistics, having left her law practice to become director of Soul Flowing International. They've documented everything. 3,847 women now practice soul flowing across 17 countries. Medical mysteries correlating with prayer times. Caregivers reporting supernatural strength. Marriages restored at 3:47 a.m. Children returning to faith because they watched their mothers wrestle with God and win. The movement David envisioned and paid for with his life is happening. But tonight isn't about numbers, it's about blessing. Margaret opens David's final journal entry, the one marked "Read when the chapel is full." If you're reading this, the chapel is complete and you're about to bless the sisters. Here's what I need you to know. Soul flowing isn't something I invented. It's something I remembered. Every generation has had its 347 warriors, women who stood watch while the world slept. Your grandmother knew it. Her grandmother knew it. We just forgot, buried it under busy, lost it in the lie that exhaustion means failure. But you've remembered now. You've reclaimed the fourth watch. You've discovered that flowing with God's rhythm beats grinding against it every time. Margaret raises her hands over the sisters. I bless your sleepless hours, may they become your most sacred. I bless your exhausted bodies, may they become vessels of divine strength. I bless your 3:47 wake-ups, may you never again fear the summons. I bless your caregiving burdens, may you see them as credentials for this ministry. You are not insomniacs, you are intercessors. You are not failing, you are flowing. You are not alone at 3:47, you never were. 10,000 generations of women stand with you in the fourth watch. But that's when the unexpected happens. Margaret's granddaughter, Sarah's daughter, only 15, stands up. Grandma Margaret, I've been waking at 3:47 since Grandpa David died. I thought I was broken, but now I understand I'm not broken. I'm blessed. I'm fourth generation soul flowing. And Margaret realizes, the movement isn't just for exhausted women over 50. It's for every woman who's ever wondered why God allows the breaking. It's because that's where the light gets in. From that first terrible night when Margaret gripped the sink at 3:47, ready to collapse, to now standing before hundreds at the first Soul Flowing conference, teaching what David died to birth. The transformation isn't just personal. Mom walks without assistance. Sarah leads with compassion instead of control. 3 generations of women finally understanding their inherited wake-up call isn't curse but calling. The documentary crew captures it all: emergency rooms where nurses practice soul flowing between codes, corporate offices where executives meet at 5 a.m. before markets open, nursing homes where residents teach soul flowing to their caregivers. A movement that started with one exhausted woman and her dead husband's journal now spans continents. Christian women over 50 aren't just surviving caregiving, they're transforming it into spiritual warfare that wins. I thought I was losing my mother to religious mania. Instead, I found my mother and myself. Soul flowing isn't about waking at 3:47. It's about being awake to what you're actually doing. Every diaper changed, every medication given, every sleepless night, it's all prayer. My mother didn't just care for my grandmother's body. She midwifed her soul. And Dad, he didn't die from soul flowing. He died for it, so we could live it. Margaret faces the camera directly. I challenge you to 90 days. Not perfection presence. Wake when summoned. Rest when released. Create your sacred space. Join our forum. Document your journey. Because somewhere, another woman is waking at 3:47 thinking she's alone. Thinking she's failing. Not knowing she's about to discover soul flowing. You could be the one who shows her the way home. Here's what I promise. Soul flowing won't make caregiving easy or idle. Make it meaningful. You won't wake less, you'll wake with purpose. Your exhaustion won't disappear. Will transform into qualification for ministry you never imagined. And that person you're caring for, they're not your burden. They're your battlefield. And you're about to win. 1 year later, the garage chapel is now too small. They've bought the abandoned church down the street, renovating it into the International Soul Flowing Center. Margaret stands where the altar used to be, 3:47 a.m. But she's not alone. Thousands join online. Mom sits front row, fully recovered, teaching other stroke survivors. Sarah leads worship. David's portrait hangs on the wall with one word underneath: founder. But Margaret knows the truth. David wasn't the founder. He was the seed. And from one man's willing death, 10,000 women found life. The clock strikes 5 a.m. The sun rises. And somewhere, another exhausted woman discovers she's not drowning, she's soul flowing. Welcome to the 5 a.m. Sisters. You've been expected. You've always belonged. Your 3:47 wake up isn't insomnia, it's initiation. Type soul flowing in the comments if you're ready to transform exhaustion into exaltation. Share this with every woman who thinks she's failing at caregiving. Because the truth is, she's not failing. She's flowing. She just doesn't know it yet.